FSP has really stepped up their RGB game with the mid-tower CMT340 case. Howdy guys, Ponchato here, and today we'll be taking a look at the recently released CMT340 from FSP. We'll go over the features, design, cable management, and benchmarks, so let's get started. For raw specs, the 340 is somewhat smaller than a typical mid-tower case, coming in at about 370mm deep, 470mm tall, and 210mm wide. That's 14.5 by 18.5 by 8.1 in inches. It's also fairly hefty at about 6.2 kilograms or 13.7 pounds, owing mostly to the two tempered glass panels. It can fit ATX, micro ATX, or mini ITX motherboards and has 7 expansion slots with replaceable covers held on with screws. Thankfully, no bend and snap covers here. In terms of capacities, it can handle CPU coolers up to 160mm tall, graphics cards up to 350, and power supplies up to 170mm in length. The price comes out to just under $100 US, so I'd call this a mid-range case. The two big features of the 340 are the tempered glass and RGB fans. It has two 4mm tempered glass panels, one in the front and one on the side, with the front panel offset about 5mm from the front of the chassis to allow airflow into the fans. It is open all the way around the edges, but it isn't a huge gap. As we'll see in the benchmarks later, this does end up holding back system cooling a little bit. Both glass panels are tinted, with the front more heavily tinted than the side, and both have a black border around the edge to hide the mounting hardware. The side panel isn't mounted like most TG panels I've seen, but rather like old school non-tempered glass side panels with channels that allow it to slide into place and two thumb screws at the back of the case. A super nice feature as a result of mounting the side panel like this is that it won't fall off when you take out the screws and slide it back. It'll just rest on the bottom. The front panel is also easily removable with 4 thumb screws on the interior, which you'll need to do if you're going to replace the front fans or put in a radiator. Because the 340 comes with 3 120mm fans in the front, you get strong cooling performance out of the box. The fourth and final included fan is in the standard rear exhaust position, which gives it a typical front to back airflow pattern. We'll talk a bit more about the lighting effects in a bit, but looking at total air cooling capacity, the CMT340 can fit 2 additional 120 or 140mm fans on top, in addition to the included 3 up front and 1 in the back. If you're going for liquid cooling, it can fit a 360mm radiator up front, though you will need to move the hard drive cage to its rear position to allow enough room. On top, you can fit a 240mm radiator. Despite being able to fit 2 140 fans, you won't be able to fit a 280mm radiator because the motherboard is mounted too close to the top of the case, and there's not enough room front to back for the radiator to fit. As for filters, the top includes a magnetic filter to keep dust from settling inside the case, and the power supply intake is also filtered, though it does require tipping the case on its side to access. The fans are powered and controlled with a small board mounted on the back side of the motherboard tray, which is powered with a single Molex connector. I'd like to see companies start using SATA power connectors for things like this instead, since it's much more likely for someone with a modular power supply to only need SATA cables rather than Molex. You can use the fan controller's built-in RGB effects, cycling through them with a button on the front panel, or you can plug it into your motherboard's RGB header if you prefer running your own lighting effects or need to sync the case fans with other components. If you go with motherboard control, you can actually plug in the RGB button header into your motherboard to have that button act as a reset switch. That button is a repurposed reset switch to begin with. The built-in RGB effects are actually pretty sweet. There are 17 different styles, including an off setting, and the LEDs do look very nice behind the tinted glass. The lighting is colorful and not excessively bright. They're subtle in a well-lit room, and importantly, they aren't blinding at night. It's a nice balance, and altogether makes for one of the better looking cases I've reviewed. The front I/O is composed of 2 USB 3 ports, microphone and headphone jacks, power and hard drive activity LEDs, and the power button. I'd just like to say I much prefer just having 2 USB 3 ports on the front like this. When case manufacturers split it into 1 USB 3 and 1 USB 2, you have an extra cable to deal with from the front panel, and it makes cables just that much more cluttered. I mean, it is 2019. I think we can start phasing out USB 2. Looking at storage capacity, there are 2 removable 2.5-inch trays on the power supply shroud, each held in place with a single thumb screw. If you don't want to mount your SSDs where they're visible, you can move them to the back of the motherboard tray where they mount vertically. The hard drive cage comes with 2 trays, each of which can fit either a 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drive, bringing the total capacity to either 4 2.5-inch drives or 2 2.5 and 2 3.5. Unfortunately, the cage has no rubber isolation grommets for the hard drives, but since it uses drive caddies rather than hard mounting to the case, drive noise doesn't transfer to the case all that much. The drive cage can be positioned closer to the back to make room for a radiator at the front of the case, though this will limit how much room you'll have for the power supply. With the cage in the forward position, my 170mm modular power supply just barely fits, and with the cage in the rear position, you'll be limited to less than 150mm. A 140mm power supply should fit nicely though. If you won't be using a hard drive at all, the drive cage can be entirely removed to make more room. As for cable management, I love how many cable tie points they have on the motherboard tray. I count 10 on the motherboard tray, another 7 toward the front, and they even included 2 cable ties at the base. There's also a large hole above the motherboard tray for the CPU power cable, another decently sized opening in the power supply shroud, and 2 large routing holes at the front. And there's plenty of space for cables as well. A little over half an inch directly behind the motherboard tray and more than an inch toward the front. Lack of grommets on the openings is a mark against them, but FSP otherwise did a fantastic job with the cable management options in this case. When it comes to assembly, the process of getting my test system into the case was pretty easy for a compact mid-tower like this. FSP includes 8 power supply screws, which you'll need for the way it gets mounted in the case, 17 SSD screws in case you lose one, 16 motherboard and hard drive screws, and 8 fan screws if you'll be adding fans to the top of the case. They also included some zip ties for the cables, though I always use Velcro ties in my builds instead. The rear I/O shield for the motherboard popped into place without any trouble, and all the motherboard standoffs are pre-installed, so I simply dropped it in and added all the screws. The graphics card installation is also very easy. Remove the screws holding the expansion slot covers in, unscrew the bracket clamp, and drop the GPU in. I'm a bit torn on which style of mounting I prefer, with the screws outside the back like this, or with them inside as it is on most cases. Both of them have their downsides, but for this case the exterior mounts work a bit better since they allow the case to be a little shorter front to back. Hard drive installation is about as simple as it can get. Pull the drive tray out, pop the hard drive in, making sure the notches in the tray are inserted into the drive's mounting holes, then slide it all back in place. Easy and straightforward. Installation of the power supply is a bit unique. This is the first power supply mounting system I've seen like this, and I actually really like it. The supply doesn't mount directly to the back like in most cases, but rather mounts first to a backplate, then the backplate mounts to the case. This allows you to very easily install the power supply without needing to wrestle it into position underneath the shroud. You just slide it in from the back. You'll definitely want to install whatever modular cables you'll be using first though, since there's not a lot of room to maneuver underneath the shroud. This setup also allows you to easily add or remove modular cables as needed, since you can just slide the power supply out rather than completely remove it from the case. My only complaint in this area is that the bumpers that the power supply rests on are hard plastic rather than soft rubber or foam for better isolation. After managing the cables, this case comes out looking pretty clean. I didn't even have to use any of the cable tie down points since there was enough room around the edges to hold everything in place and out of sight. The cable routing holes are well positioned and allow the front panel headers and power connectors to be nicely organized on the front side. Even with a really busy build, the CMT340 makes cable management a breeze. Now let's look at the benchmarks. My test bench is a Ryzen 5 2400G cooled by a CryoRig H7 Quad Lumi. The graphics card is a GTX 1060 3GB from my ASUS, and the power supply is a Seasonic Prime AirTouch 850. Load temps are recorded while running Prime 95 and Unigine superposition, and temperatures are reported as deltas, degrees above ambient. First, we'll look at noise from the case fans. These measurements are taken with only the case fans running and everything else stopped. There's an important note here. Since the fans use a proprietary connector, you can't control fan speed in this case. They run at roughly 1200 RPM, which is a bit faster than what I'd use, but it's still a decent balance between airflow and noise. The main issue is the fans will be running at the same speed whether the system is under heavy load or completely idle, which puts the minimum noise level at 38.7 decibel. Now here's the overall noise chart at idle and load. Because of the constant fan speed, the 340 does hit around 40 dB at idle. Load noise level actually isn't that much higher since the case fans are still running at the same speed, where it reaches just over 44 decibels, just behind the other cases I've tested. Here we'll look at the CPU temperatures. This is a bit more interesting. The idle temperature is quite a bit lower than other cases at only 7.9 degrees. However, the limited airflow rears its ugly head here, with the 2400G hitting a 61.6 degree delta. It's not unsafe by any means, but the restriction caused by the front tempered glass panel being so close to the intakes leads to a notable decrease in cooling performance for the processor. A top-mounted AIO would probably work wonders here, since airflow through the case isn't all that great. As they say though, beauty is pain. Things look a lot better on the GPU front. Idle temperature is right in line with other cases I've tested, and the effect of poor airflow is far less pronounced. This is likely due to the fact that the graphics card can exhaust air directly out of the case, rather than relying on the case fans to whisk away the heat. This is one of very few situations where I think a blower-cooled GPU would actually fare better than an open cooler like this. So the CMT340 is much more about appearances than objective performance, and to be honest, it is a very good-looking case. The triple RGB fans in the the front combined with the cool built-in lighting effects, along with fantastic cable management and nice styling, make this case a winner in the looks department. That said, if you're going to be running an extremely high-powered build with a hot GPU and housefire CPU, this case is going to limit your overclocking potential unless you choose components specifically for this case. Namely, a liquid CPU cooler to mount at the top and a graphics card with a blower cooler to exhaust air out the back. It's a small detail, but I also wanted to mention that FSP packs the case in polyethylene foam rather than styrofoam. This stuff is way easier to deal with because styrofoam spews all those little pellets everywhere, while this foam doesn't. I would love to see more cases shipped like this. If you're looking for a compact case that's easy to build with, easy to manage cables in, and looks great all around, the FSP CMT340 is well worth a look. Follow the link in the description to pick one up for yourself. Hit subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified of new videos as soon as they're up. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit subscribe, and I want to hear from you. What matters more to you, looks or cooling? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I hope I helped, and I'll see you in the next video. Whew, that wasn't too bad. I am not a fan of cable management, and it's so nice when cases have enough room to just shove all the cables into the edges. I like how that's how we deal with cables. Just jam it wherever it'll fit, bro. Now the next step is wireless power inside computers. Is such a thing even possible? Yes, it is.